Hey everybody, how you doing? Into Weapons back again with you. Wanted to do a quick video today on how I disassemble and clean my Glock. I'm sure there's probably 100,000 videos on YouTube on how to do the same exact process, but everyone's kind of a little bit different, and I thought maybe if I helped one or two people it'd probably be worth it for me anyway, just to kind of throw a video out there. So without further ado, we'll get right into it. First things always is make sure your gun is clear, make sure there's nothing in the chamber or loaded or anything like that, and fired in a safe direction. Put it back and you can set it aside like that, because what we're going to do is start with the magazine. And typically with the magazine I don't clean a whole lot or break it down a whole lot until I put maybe 1,000 rounds through it or something, and I'll pop off the base plate here, take the spring and follower out and kind of wipe everything down. But typically it won't get that dirty, so I'll just kind of take my brush and my solvent, my gun cleaning solvent here, spray it on, and just kind of quickly go over the area that fits closest to the action. That's typically the stuff that gets the most residue on it. And I'll just kind of quickly go over with the brush. Loosen those residues up a little bit, push that follower down with the head of this brush a little bit, get inside there a little bit. Just like that. Nothing major. Grab a clean towel, swipe it down. Again, these don't get too dirty, so unless you're putting lots and lots of rounds through it, you really don't need to put a whole lot of attention towards it. But it is good to keep your magazine clean, because it will help, hinder the operation of the firearm if it malfunctions as well as the firearm. So the next thing we'll do is we'll get right into the disassembly of the firearm. With Glock it's pretty simple. There's no tools required or anything, and again this is a pretty standard operation I'm sure most people are familiar with. But again, we got a clear pistol here. We'll go ahead and release the slide down. We'll pull the trigger, and then what we'll do is kind of slide our hand up behind like this and get a grapple on it like that and pull back just slightly, and you'll have a tab on this side and a tab on the reverse side. Those two tabs need to be pushed downward at the same exact time, so I'll just lift my fingers up around on both sides of the frame here and push down on them, and then push the slide forward as you got those pushed down, and the slide will come forward right off the frame of the gun. You'll have your your lower part of the gun here we can set aside for the time being, and you got your slide. The slide breaks down pretty easy. You got your recoil spring here. This is the dual action recoil spring that's part of the 4th gen Glock models. As you can see there, it's got the little spring inside the big spring. We'll set that aside. The barrel itself just kind of pops right up and out of the slide. Pull that out, set that aside, and then you got the slide. I'm not going to break it down much further than this. I only have probably, I think, 150 rounds through this gun, so it really is not that dirty. If many of you are familiar with my channel, you know that I keep my guns extraordinarily clean. Every time I shoot the gun, I will clean it. I'm kind of a clean fanatic that way. So again, only 150 rounds through this gun, so I'm not going to go much further than this. This is just a good, real quick field strip and cleaning that you can do if you only got a few rounds to your gun. So first thing we're going to do is grab some bore and action cleaner, something like this. You could use a solvent as well if you don't have something like this specifically designed for the gun, it's the barrel. But I'll spray this in here. This breaks down that residues a little bit. This is really the only part of the gun that I'll use this stuff on. I'll set that aside and just let that work into the barrel. What I'll do at that point is just move on to a different part of the gun. The recoil spring, maybe I'll wipe down with an oil lubricant wipe, like this Hops No. 9 lubricating gun oil field wipes, or I got some of this other stuff here, which is the Rem oil wipes. Those work pretty well. So I won't do a whole lot of brushing on this recoil spring unless it's apparently really dirty. Might break it down a little bit and clean that up, but typically that's not going to be necessary. What I'll probably do is just start with the receiver, kind of show you what I'm going to do here. Again, I'm not going to pop any of these pins out and take any of the fire control group or any of the frame of the pistol out here. What I'm going to do is just kind of take a brush like this, spray it with my Hops Elite gun cleaner in a spray bottle. I find that's the easiest. Just take my brush and kind of go over the surface here real quickly. You don't got to spend a whole lot of time unless it's really built up residues on there. Then you can brush a little harder or a little longer. Use a little thicker of a brush. Instead of using something like this, you could use a thicker nylon brush like this blue one, or what you'll see me use on the slide in the firing channel area is something like this, where the firing pin comes out on the bolt face. I'll use some of that where it kind of builds up a little bit stronger, but otherwise I just use this real light brush to kind of go through and clean all this stuff up on the inside. I'll keep my brush pretty wet. I'm not going to be concerned about it because I'm going to go back afterwards and wipe all this out, so I'm not worried about solvents being left behind or anything like that. But again, just going over it real quick, getting kind of the area where the slide rides on the rails there, and the back here where the fire control group works, and in the front here again where the rails kind of meet with the rest of the frame, and then just in the front area here where the barrel is on the frame. That'll build up a little bit more residue I should say, than other areas on the frame. And then after that, again, just going to go back and wipe all this down. And I'll start on the plastic areas, make sure I kind of get those off. Solvent sitting on plastic, as you can imagine, doesn't work too well, so I'll typically kind of start with those areas and then work my way back. Not being overly concerned about it, because what I'm going to do is use one of those oil wipes to kind of go back and go over it again. I use one of these little dowels here to kind of get into these hard areas, or use as a pushing stick for my rags and whatnot to get down into the magazine channel. Make well here, kind of get some of my finger in there and get the rest of the solvents out of the mag well. And then I'll kind of go back a little bit more and do a little bit more of a detailed job of just getting down into some of those creases and crevices that my initial one didn't get. Again, not really being too concerned about it, because again, I'm going to go over it with that Rem oil wipe. Otherwise, that looks pretty good right now. We'll set that aside. We'll go back and take a look at the slide here. I also rotate my barrel, so it's been sitting on this side. I'll go ahead and rotate it that way. You'll notice if I tip it out here a little bit here, you'll notice some of the solvents come out of there. So I'll just let that sit in there again a little bit. And use a little bit more on my brush here and go back over the slide. Just going to go over this area here. Again, focusing a lot more on the rails where the gun slides back and forth. You'll be able to see where it builds up the most. That's pretty apparent. Especially when you start brushing it around with solvents, it'll kind of stick out a little bit in your eye. We'll get the front of the area here by the muzzle. That does build up a lot over in this area, so I'll actually use some solvents right on the tip of the barrel here, or the slide frame. And mine's not that dirty, fortunately, so it's not going to take me too long. I'll get my brush up in here like this. This helps me get into the corners of the slide down there in the bottom. And you won't be able to see from here, but some of the buildup that you'll get a lot is on the bolt face here, and there's a lot of brass color to it right now where it's hitting that that face of that bolt, or the round is. So what I'm going to do is use my brass brush here, spray it down real good. You always want a good wet brush. Point it downward so the bolt face is downward. That way solvent's not getting down into your firing pin channel unnecessarily. And then just I'm going up and down like this. And what that's going to do is remove all that brass and fouling from that bolt face. I don't want to use this brass brush too often. Generally only on the areas that are not going to be a problem cosmetically. When you look at it, it's not going to be apparent that you use the brass brush. Typically brass brush will be pretty easy on your surfaces. It's obviously going to leave some discoloration behind wherever you clean a little bit, but as long as it's wet, you generally won't have too much of an issue, and if you don't push too hard. But you know, if you can see this now, the camera's probably not going to pick it up, but the bolt face is very clean now. There isn't any buildup on that whatsoever. And again, I'm just going to go back here again with my rag and wipe all these other surfaces down. And again, I'll go back with a Rem oil wipe, so getting this really good isn't that necessary, as that Rem oil wipe, or the Hops number 9 wipe, will get it a lot cleaner than what this thing will. I'll get a little bit closer to the nooks and crannies of everything. Use my little wood stick to kind of get in there like this into the real hard areas, the edges, just like that. And then just overall clean it out. And that's pretty good for right now. The bolt face is good. I don't see any residues in here anywhere. The outside is pretty clear. So we'll set that aside. At that point then we can move right into the barrel here and show you what we got going on here. There's probably still a little bit more left in there. Just a little bit, not a whole lot. So we'll go ahead and use our guide rod and 9mm brass brush to start us off with. That'll break down the residues inside that barrel real well. Always wet brass. You always want your brass brushes to be wet before you put them through. I'll use a little bit more of this solvent down the barrel here, just to make sure I got enough solvent on there to do the job. And then I'm just going to go move it back and forth maybe 10 to 12 times, breaking up that solvent or the residues in there with the solvent. Making sure I go all the way through and all the way back. You don't want to turn directions halfway through while that brass brush is not fully outside the barrel. You'll actually damage the inside or scratch it pretty well changing directions with a brass brush. And then once we got that, we'll take off the brass brush here. We'll replace it with a tip that'll accept some patches, and I got some 9mm patches here. You can get the universal ones that'll do you through all kinds of different calibers. And it's one perk of kind of consolidating your caliber in your collection is you have less cleaning supplies as well, which is a big plus. And then we'll go ahead and just slide that through. I did spray it down a little bit with the gun cleaner here. That'll make it so it grabs all that residues a little bit better than a dry patch. And again, my gun wasn't too dirty here, as you can see. That patch really isn't coming back too dirty there. Not dirty at all, in fact. So we'll go ahead and remove that. We'll set that aside. We'll grab another one. And essentially what I'm doing here is just kind of throwing a second patch through to make sure that it's still clean. And the patch comes back halfway decent. And you can see this one's not turning colors at all, so it's not picking up any residues left behind in there. So what I'll do just to be sure is I'll switch back to this brass brush real quick. Give the inside of this barrel a spray. Make sure it's wet again. Brass brush, I'll get it wet again. And I'll send that through maybe 5-6 times, break up anything maybe that was left behind or missed on that first pass. There we go. And we're using my same guide tip here, my guide rod tip with the clean patch on there still. We'll push it through and hopefully, with any luck, it'll come back clean. If it doesn't, it's a good opportunity to go back again with that brass brush and just repeat that process. Don't gotta be perfect, you're never gonna get it perfect. And you can see this one's pretty darn clean. It's got a little bit black on there, but nowhere near what it was, or you know, it's probably not getting much cleaner than that, so that's definitely acceptable. So we'll go ahead and take that patch out, set it aside. We got a fairly clean barrel there. What I'll probably do is just use you can either use a clean patch or one of these snakes here. I like these snakes because they got some brass on it, some brass padding right here, as well as a real thick you know, bore snake here, brush, or essentially a pad that comes through and grabs anything that was left behind. So I really like these products. Cleans out that barrel real nice. So you can make 1 or 2 passes with this thing. That'll generally do the trick. These are great for your range bag if you just need a quick one at the range before you put your gun in your bag. This will definitely clean out anything just kind of sitting on top of the surface. It's not going to obviously give it a deep clean, but a real good way to get an initial clean at the range before you stick it in your bag and maybe have your gun sit there for a amount of time without being cleaned. So with that being done, what I'll probably do is just take some of my Ops No. 9 lubricating oil, spray a good amount inside that barrel. Since I'm not going to be using it for a while, I'm not going to be worrying about it being, you know, covered in oil and accepting a lot of residues when I shoot. You really don't want a whole lot of oils and stuff on your gun when you shoot. Typically that'll help the build-up process of residues. It's, as you can imagine, being wet, it's going to stick, it's going to build up a lot more, where if it's dry, it's going to free float around a little bit better than what it would be, you know, again, wet. So again, mine's going in more into storage. I'm not going to shoot it for a while, so in order to protect it, what I'll end up doing is giving it a good oil lubricating surface, spray down my pad here and send that through. I don't want it dripping wet, you know, so this pad will achieve the purpose of just kind of throwing that out there and evening out how much I got down the barrel. The rest of this I'm putting on the outside of any metal surfaces, again just wiping away any of the excess stuff and kind of just worrying more about maintaining the surface area and getting a good even coat on there, and everything looks real nice. Same thing, what I'll do is then take one of these lubricating gun wipes. I don't typically use this stuff because it's really it spreads around real easily, and I think it doesn't do as well of a job at picking up and cleaning off residues as something like this. One of these rigs work real well. It's got oil, lubricating oil in it. It's not as tough as a lubricating oil, but it's good for wiping down the surfaces. It'll definitely pick up anything you missed with your cloth that you were using before. And we'll just kind of get into all these corners and crevices. The thing itself will kind of get into the cracks by itself. You just kind of got to push hard enough. It'll leave a nice layer of oil behind. And you can be able to tell kind of how well you did with your cleaning job initially with how much black and residue comes off this cloth here, because if you're getting a lot of dirt coming back, you generally didn't do a good enough cleaning job with the brush. So I'm not getting very much here, which means I'm doing pretty well. I'm catching a little bit off the rails and stuff like that probably the towel didn't catch because it didn't get good enough into the cracks and corners, but overall it's doing a pretty good job, and you can see that it's not picking up anything. I didn't leave a whole good sign. And we'll use this again for the inside of the frame here. Just going back, trying to get into a little bit more of the cracks and crevices where that towel couldn't really get into just because it's a little bit thicker. But I'm not over concerned about it, guys. You just kind of get in here. It's a gun. It's going to get dirty. It doesn't got to be perfect. If it was a collector, I might spend a lot more time on it, something like that. But this is a function gun. And this is probably a lot more cleaning than what most people even do, to tell you the truth. I'll probably get a comment or two saying that I'm a little over anal on cleaning my guns even with this process. So, it's everyone's personal preference on how much you actually clean your guns and maintain your guns. I look at my guns a lot as an investment piece. Further down the line, if I need to liquefy or sell my guns for whatever reason, you got clean guns and they're well maintained, you're going to get a lot more for them than what you did if they're dirty and beat up and rusted and pitted and just overall crap. You got to maintain your investments, and they'll definitely treat you well in the end when you need the money from them. So again, with that recoil spring, I'm just wiping down with this oil wipe, and that's pretty much it. We got the lower receiver cleaned up, lubricated. We got the slide cleaned up, lubricated. We got the barrel and the inside cleaned up and lubricated. What we're going to do now is just reassembly. We'll kind of just set everything aside here. The barrel will go into the slide here, just like that. Get your little clips and stuff facing upwards. Your recoil spring, this little black part here, as you can imagine, because it's the cosmetic feature of that recoil spring, will go towards where you can actually see it in the front of the gun. So the little part towards the back here, you kind of push in a little bit, and it will jam up against this little slide stop there. At that point then, we'll go ahead and take the lower receiver, and we'll fit it on there, just following the two rails, starting from the front, working our way back, as you can see there. And hopefully you don't have any issues. There we go. Just kind of give her a good push, and it should jump right back on the frame there. You can pull it in a safe direction and pull the trigger, make sure she operates. Do that again, and everything looks good. At that point, what I generally do, you could be done right there. Just give her a good wipe down, make sure you get all that, that oil off there, because you obviously don't want that all over your fingers. But what I'll typically do is give it a good little wipe down, get all that excess stuff off, and I'll take it a little bit further with that. And certainly don't need to do this, but I buy these gun and reel silicone cloths, and this puts a nice coating on it. I really like this, especially when you're putting it in the safe for storage purposes, and this gives it a nice sheen, a nice protective surface. Getting all the areas here, especially the plastic. This does a real nice job. Keeps it looking really shiny, really nice looking. Again, not something you need to do, but it doesn't hurt. Doesn't hurt. And that's about it, guys. That's the Glock 19 Gen 4 disassembly, cleaning, and reassembly. Again, I know that there's probably 1,000 videos out there on this, but hopefully it helps somebody out. If you have any questions or anything, let me know. Otherwise, as always, I hope you enjoyed, and until next time, take her easy.